All right, it's time. So let's get started. Hi and welcome, and thank you all for joining me this morning. We are going to be talking about generative AI. My name is Manjeet Rege. I am the chair of the graduate programs in software and data science at University of St. Thomas. I want to thank our sponsors for sponsoring the event here today. This webinar is being sponsored by Broadreach, and we are going to hear from them later as well. If you have questions for our guests or our industry leaders, please type them in the chat or maybe send directly to me on Zoom. The webinar is being recorded, so the recording will be shared later as well. Our panel of leaders include Jote Taddese, who's the Vice President of United Health Group, Raul Rodriguez, Vice President at Watson University, Hyderabad, India, Tom Marlow, who's the CTO of Black Hills AI, and Justin Grammens, CEO and founder of Lab 651. So let me directly jump in here. I'll ask a question, and then while you're responding to the question, maybe you can speak a little bit about the work that you do and a bit about your organization as well. So my first question, and I'll start off with Jote here, is what type of generative AI capabilities are you investing in for your business?
Very well, Professor Manjeet, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel, and esteemed panelists, thank you for being here as well. I come from a broad range of backgrounds, including healthcare, retail technology, medtech, and so forth. And when it comes to AI investments, I think that is the biggest dilemma today within the healthcare space is not only where to invest, but also what are the impacts that we want to bring to the customers that we serve, right? And really looking at the gap that exists today within the healthcare delivery space, how we are touching our customers and members, how are we personalizing the care that we provide them. So really honing on the business impact that we want to bring that should inform or drive the investment decisions. Without that, it makes it incredibly difficult, especially for healthcare companies, and depending on what are the therapies and solutions that they provide to customers, and where are the greatest disparities in terms of healthcare delivery. Do we want to impact the cost of healthcare in terms of bringing down the cost? Do we want to reduce the number of times patients go back to hospitals because of inadequate or incomplete healthcare delivery? And how does that reduce the overall cost? So thinking about the company bottom line, but also putting the customer right in the middle, I think should be surrounding all things around decision for where to invest on AI.
Absolutely. Let me move on to Raul. You're doing great work at Watson with the AI Research Center, and I've been fortunate to have a look and been affiliated with that as well. Can you speak a little bit about generative AI and how how do you envision that maybe transforming education and other stuff that you're doing at Watson as well?
Well, we will look at two main aspects. Number one will be internal at education system, or higher education more likely than education, as well as towards the industry as outreach. Now, if we look at the internal prospects, we don't look at AI per se as a large umbrella which covers only the technical components, but we look at it from a cognitive neuroscience approach, most like a mix of psychology and cognitive sciences. So we do pay substantial attention to the human factor. Now, if you look at the education side, we have devised a sort of mechanism through LLMs. Now we'll have to use multimodal systems also, but at the moment LLMs, and it's about to become, is in working process to become policy as well with the UGC, which is the regulatory body here. It's about utilizing different psychometric components of the students and segregate them into clusters with data collected from high school. And that means you enable a complete personalized learning environment for each student, with the students that they will be able to cope, giving them purpose and reducing the stress, as well as reducing the risk of suicide, among other conditions that are pretty high in general terms globally. If you look at the corporate sector and industry, as a university, we provide substantial assistance, particularly to transportation sector, and very strongly to aviation sector and airport operations. That's a more of a selfish motive. That is, of course, a very for-profit motive. But at the same time, we also utilize consumer behavior theories to analyze that. And we do have substantial data sets collected from different sources in the country. For those who are not familiar with the Indian ecosystem, and particularly the aviation ecosystem, the Indian government has devised various techniques. One of them is a perfect data collection tool, which is called the Yatra, which is a centralized app that collects all your details from passport to national IDs, your boarding passes, and you don't need anything. You can enter the airport, do the check-in, enter in the aircraft just with your face, just like in Dubai is happening now. So that happens in local airports at the national level in India. Imagine how much data, you don't have to imagine it, I'm telling you how much data you collect. It's humongous. And that data is lying with airports, airport operators, as well as the airlines. So as far as there is no privacy breach, you can utilize that data. And since they're already signing up for consent, there is no problem. But as a university, we do cater this to streams, but always from a humanistic, if you like, point of view. That's where it comes from.
Absolutely. I like the fact about using, high school data even before a student comes into college. So great point there. Tom, Black Hills AI and the great work that you are doing there.
Yeah, so I think at a high level, it comes down to workflow tools. I guess more specifically, our business has been always focused on automation. So there's always been this target of redundant, time-taking, repetitive tasks. That's kind of been at the heart of what we do. Generative AI has allowed us to kind of shift the threshold of what is maybe you might consider mundane, kind of farther to the side of the spectrum, requiring like more expert knowledge, which I think is really interesting because it allows us to do more with automation, kind of further into that expert realm than previously we've been able to. So this is a lot of where we're working with generative AI, moving that threshold, trying to get tools that really allow our customers to garner more value out of the human resources that they have on hand.
And then you're also making an internal tool on generative AI, right?
Yeah, so there's a few uses. We've got the customer facing, obviously general like machine learning technologies we already have built into a lot of our automation processes, but then internally also for a lot of some of the applications that we see around data management as well.
Moving on to Justin.
Yes. Hey Manjeet, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here and attending this conversation. So I wear a couple different hats. I'll talk about Lab 651. We're a small consulting shop. We work a lot in software. And so I really pushed the team to start thinking about how they can use Copilot to start cranking out. I guess crank out maybe isn't the right word, but start being more productive. And I think it comes down to kind of the thing that Tom was talking about. How can we start bringing in these tools that can kind of make you become superhuman, right? And push, maybe your skill level isn't up to, the expert level, but could you actually have a person sort of writing Copilot with you as you're writing code? And I've found these tools to be very, very effective, and been able to allow people to, again, use their brain power in a different way, rather than writing a bunch of mundane tasks or mundane functions or having to figure stuff out along the way. Let Copilot sort of handle those things. The other aspect that I work on is I have a nonprofit called Applied AI MN, and we are always trying to let people know more and more about our community, right? And so we have a community of around 3,000 people. We do conferences, we have a podcast, we do monthly meetups, and a lot of things that we try and do is, since we're a nonprofit, we're sort of running on a low budget, is how can we start using AI in our sales and marketing, right? And so some of these tools people maybe already be using, but when you have a call with somebody, how can you actually have the message transcribed, for example? That can be very, very effective. How can you use something like DALL to create images or new artwork that you might want to put in? Or Canva. Canva has a really, really interesting AI tool now that you can start creating some beautiful presentations. And I'm not a graphic artist, so you can start using AI to sort of build those in. So I really try and coach companies that are sort of in that small to medium sized range, that there's a lot of ways for you to improve your sales and marketing. And I'll touch finally on the podcast. There's a lot of pieces when I record somebody and have a meeting with somebody and we record our podcast. That's just the first little piece of the tool. There's a whole series of things that need to happen. We need to start working through making sure that the audio is set up correctly. We need to make sure that we can create liner notes. We can make sure that it goes out on social media, that there's a summarization that happens. And so bringing AI into that entire pipeline is super, super powerful for us. And it allows us to create some really, really interesting content at a fraction of the cost that, as you know, there's millions of podcasts out there. So how can a little podcast like us talking about artificial intelligence be able to compete? We actually use artificial intelligence to make our podcasts even better. So a lot of different angles that I try and talk with companies about, organizations, on how they can essentially, sort of multiply their impact in the world.
Absolutely. Google last week came out with Google Gemini, which is the first multimodal generative AI model. Now, I know there is a bit of a controversy around the fact that maybe their demo video wasn't done in real time and it was fake. It was a generated video. Let's put it that way for generative AI. But one thing that is to take away from Google Gemini is that it is multimodal in the sense that it can, as an input, as well as in terms of producing, it can do image, audio, video, code, and what I like about it is that it is not done in the typical machine learning AI ensemble way. That is, you have a separate model for image, a separate for AI, a separate for video, and a separate for code. And then you kind of have them talk to each other. What they have talked about is that this is something built from the ground up so that different types of data can basically talk to each other in the sense that you might have an image that may not be offensive by itself. You might have text, which may not be offensive by itself, but the two put together might be offensive, for example. And that's where multimodal knowledge, I think, comes in. Wanted to hear from you guys about how multimodal generative AI can further enable what you guys just now talked about. Let's start with Raul.
Well, Manjeet, I believe that as far as the industry competition and race that they have between Microsoft, Google, and Meta and the others, along with the European Union on their own mental trick regulating AI, we need to understand exactly how and when are we going to stop consuming more time in cleaning data, that transforming clean data into output. because whichever corporate or industry, even SMEs and startups I speak to, they speak about AI products and the services, and even utilizing Gemini can be one of the options, but the problem is always the same. Most of the time goes into data cleansing, majorly, and most of the investments as well. So as far as the race continues, the problem of data sourcing and valid data sourcing and the filtration of the correct data does not get solved, and it's still there, very much there. Besides the controversy that Google may or may not have, that's regardless, and this is also linked, I think, to the regulation of AI in some form. This kind of product launches on multimodal models also is part of the market regulating AI by itself, not government intervention or any enforcement of sorts coming in the picture. I don't know whether that will be good or bad, because ultimately these corporations are also for profit, so they are not doing it for the consumer, they're doing it for themselves. Now the question is, how do you balance out the data issue plus the regulation issue versus the actual output, which we all want to see that sentient sort of AI coming up, but is this the way forward, or do we need to just pause and think, are we doing the base, or is the mattress not there and we are lying on a flat bed with no mattress, which is what may occur at some point if we keep on moving forward on one vertical and ignoring the other. Mm-hmm. So that's a bit of a challenge, I believe. So, well, time will say, I suppose.
Justin, multimodal generative AI, how do you think that may change the applications of generative AI in your line of work?
Yeah. Well, I think like maybe what Raul was hinting at was the proof's in the pudding, right? And I think when it comes to Gemini specifically, and they're sort of rolling it out to Bard around some of these concepts. But the last time I looked, it's actually not available in their AI studio until I think December 13th. So tomorrow is really going to be the day when they're actually going to allow people to start building on top of it. And so I think competition is a great thing. I think it's really, really great to have other options out there. The video that they showed was super impressive, but as you mentioned, some of the news articles were like, yeah, we sort of put this together to maybe show a thing of what's possible, but it didn't actually sort of work that way end to end. The one thing that I will say about what they're doing is, they have 3 different versions. And the thing I didn't really touch on was, the other thing that I do is I teach a class at the University of St. Thomas, really focused on machine learning and Internet of Things. And so when you're talking about devices at the edge, you're really going to need to have something that runs on low power, smaller versions of models that maybe, are very, very narrowly focused. And so that was sort of caught my attention, is they have this Gemini Nano version that they're going to be releasing. And I personally am really excited with regards to how do we bring more and more AI to the edge, low power devices, sort of these sort of things that are around us. They're going to become more and more powerful. And that opens up a whole security can of worms and a lot of questions about, am I being watched? But I think the future of AI is not only going to be done, in the cloud in Big Iron, but it's also going to be on all these little devices. So I was really excited to sort of see that they were going to be releasing this multimodal, model on low-powered small devices with their Nano offering.
Yeah. Absolutely. Nano is something that I'm excited about as well, especially for edge intelligence. Jote, multimodal, in healthcare, you might have text data about a patient, you might have image data, you might have video recording. Where do you see multimodal kind of transforming healthcare?
Yeah, I think most of us have heard about a saying that goes, one could be data rich, but information poor. I think that is one paradigm that is going to remain for a while within the industry. A lot of companies are accumulating a lot of data in multiple domain areas. However, when we think about multimodal generative AI and the outcome of it and the impact of it on people, on organizations and various institutions, goes back to what is the quality of data on which these AI deliverables were built, right? I think that will be a constant. Again, we talked about the effort that goes into cleaning data, especially in the healthcare space, where it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of delivering the right therapy versus the wrong therapy for the wrong diagnosis or for the right diagnosis. Or it is a matter of providing the right or the wrong prescription for a particular type of ailment. It's a matter of an implanted medical device delivering the right therapy to the person's heart, to the patient's heart, versus the wrong therapy. So the more reliance on AI to conduct some of the typically human-conducted actions, especially when it comes to taking care of someone, making decisions about a therapeutic solution or medication for a person. I think that's where it becomes a really, really serious matter. Is AI really the pilot? Will it be the pilot, or will it remain the co-pilot?
Yeah.
There are certain areas that the human intelligence, I believe, the intuition, the intelligence will not be replaceable. And again, this is Jote's perspective. But much more attention needs to be paid to the various data types, be it text, video, picture, various types of signals coming in from sensors that cumulatively make a specific AI deliverable that, again, impacts a human life when it comes to the delivery of the healthcare. That's where we need to pay very close attention. And again, for those organizations within the healthcare industry.
Great. Moving on to Tom, multimodal generative AI and its applications in patent analytics and other legal possibilities.
Yeah, when I first thought about this, I was thinking, I'm not going to have a very interesting answer because the legal field, especially intellectual property, is so transactional, very, very text heavy. Inventions are defined by words. It's kind of the key of how it works. But the more I thought of it, a lot of what we do right now is focused around the text analysis, maybe a little bit more special characters, checkboxes on forms, that type of thing. But there are areas of intellectual property that are kind of untapped for generative AI right now, including industrial designs, which are completely image-based, with a little bit of text to go along them, but mostly images. Pharmaceutical and chemical related patents, which leverage pretty highly chemical structures that are not always represented well in just a pure text form. So being able to roll in an image of the structure is going to be very important. Trademarks is another area. Identifying trademarks, clearance, infringement when you're doing an analysis. But then also thinking about leveraging video for trademark infringement analysis out in the wild. So for companies to be able to determine if there's trademark infringement simply from analyzing video data, live or recorded, and comparing it against marks that exist. So I think that's another application where there's some interesting use case in identifying infringement in that type of case.
Well, since I have you, Tom, let me ask you a question now, which will give you an opportunity to give us an interesting answer. I mean, not that the earlier answer was not interesting, but that directly falls in your area of expertise. So EU passed the AI law last week.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've had a chance to look at that, but in US, of course, we don't have AI regulation much. In the state of Minnesota, we do have the deep fake law, which basically prevents you from coming up with a deep fake for influencing an election, or generating a deep fake content of sexual nature and things like that. But a wider regulation in US we don't have, and EU has kind of paved the way. What's your take on that? Did it cover everything? Are there things it has missed? And I'm not a lawyer, you are.
Yeah. No, the passage of this act was pretty big, globally speaking. It's not exactly the first. In fact, China introduced some countrywide rules, I want to say back in August, that put some guardrails on general AI tools, like the generative tools that we're talking about. But what's interesting about this EU AI Act is it's the most sweeping and comprehensive. It's pretty broad. The way that it works is it identifies levels of like risk in AI technology and their implementations. And I guess with respect to what we're talking about today, generative AI, thankfully, generative AI tends to fall into the limited risk category, which makes it easier to move forward with. Some of the big points, in addition to like identifying these risk levels and whether or not you have to be registered or cleared before you can put your product out on the market. Some of the big points deal with data transparency. That was probably one of the larger points that came out of the act. So identifying where the training data came from, how you're coming up with the results. So some of that kind of background behind the models. But what's interesting too is it even goes into transparency around like energy use. So there's like green initiatives that are effectively part of this, where you have to talk about how much energy is being used by the models that you are putting into these tools. So that's an interesting thing. One of the other points that always sticks out is, what are the consequences for non-compliance, right? Kind of how, what kind of teeth does the act have? And it can be pricey. So what it looks like is that companies can be fined if they're non-compliant. And I'm sure this would have to be like knowledgeable non-compliance to get at the top end of this, but up to 7% of global revenue. So 2 points there. One, that's 7% of revenue, top line. That's a big piece of margin right there. But it's also global revenue that can come out of. So even though this is just an EU jurisdictional act, that they can get their claws into global revenue, which I think is pretty interesting, arguably overreaching. I won't take a position on that here, but it's definitely interesting. They want this thing to have some actual teeth to it. I think, like lots of AI policies these days, I would expect these things to develop. There is a good amount of ambiguity in the act. Some of it probably purposeful, because we're still at the very forefront of a lot of these technologies. So it's hard to get into the high definitional clauses within an act like this without stifling development too much. I expect we're going to see policies like this get clarified as other jurisdictions roll them out. I think we're going to see clarification come out of courts as things get litigated, and then future legislations kind of roll out. One of the other things to note is that there are some exemptions that are built into the act, which I think are good, like around R&D stage technology. that kind of gets you around some of the requirements. And so there seemed to be a good initiative to try to not slow down innovation and development.
Right.
But there's also a more controversial exemptions around law enforcement use too. And I know there continues to be debate around that aspect.
Absolutely. Great. I do have a follow-up question on that particular topic, but we have almost reached halfway. So let's do a quick 5-minute break, and we're going to have the sponsor for this particular event from Broadreach speak a little bit about their company during this break. Over to you, Thea.
Thank you, Manjeet. I appreciate it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for participating. My name is Thea Rasmussen, and I head up sales and marketing, and I run the CX practice here at Broadreach. So Broadreach is an agnostic technology advisory that partners with over 600 different technology suppliers across 7 different technology pillars. So recently, we've been recording some video testimonials for our website with a handful of our customers. And one gentleman really put our business so succinctly. He said, the biggest value Broadreach has brought to us over the years is time. So time spent researching and getting educated on new technologies and trends, time spent comparing vendors and pricing, whether that's talking to 12 different vendors about the same business need or running RFI, running RFP processes. And then post-purchase, time spent babysitting implementations and support escalations. And then ultimately just time spent making the wrong or a wrong technology decision. So whether your technology initiatives are surrounding risk management, digital transformation, cost reduction, and vendor consolidation, we can certainly assist with that. So our team has expertise across those 7 different technology pillars that I mentioned. Those include security, CX and contact center, which is my wheelhouse, cloud compute, mobility and IoT, network connectivity, SD-WAN, as well as technology and mobile expense management tools for cost consolidation. And then we round all that out with managed field and IT services as well to implement moving forward. So I'm not going to take too much time because this discussion is awesome. I have a page of notes and I really want to get back to it. But the last thing I'll leave you folks with today is where the name Broadreach came from to help you remember who the heck we are. So for you sailors out there, Broadreach is a sailing term, and it describes the position of a boat sail and the wind direction that allows you to propel forward at a faster clip with minimal effort. So that's exactly what we strive to do for our clients and partners as they're moving through the complexities of the current technology landscape. So I'm Thea Rasmussen with Broadreach. Thanks for being here and letting us be a part of today's discussion. And I'll hand it back to Manjeet and the brilliant folks leading the chat today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Thea. So prior to the break, I asked Tom about the EU Act, and he gave a great perspective on that. The follow-up question that I have is, do we need something similar in US? Or should we just sit back and say that since most of the bigger companies are, they have to conform to the EU Act, they're not going to have a different service probably or different models in US. Should we not worry about that and not have a US Act, or should we follow something similar and have a US version of that? Not only US, but also in other parts. Raul.
Well, Manjeet, the question is also whether do we need regulation at all by the government or not? I mean, whether you need something in the US or not, ultimately, end of the day, if you want to launch a global regulation at the grand scale, it will probably come from the EU and the US because, well, it's in the best interest financially. Apart from that, the question is, do we want the government to regulate? I've heard from some corporations last week about innovation, and this discussion was happening, and they were comparing the regulation on IATA on the aviation sector, that there is regulations and innovation doesn't stop, which is a very poor and vague comparison, comparing a sector like transportation with artificial intelligence. Now, there may or may not be a challenge with innovation, but at the same time, what are we trying to aim at exactly? Are we preventing some mishappenings because we are concerned that fellow humans will misuse the technology? And if so, what are those concerns? And why are we assuming that there will be concerns in the first place? So it's a very presumptuous approach that there will be mistakes, people will commit crimes, people will do sort of illicit activities with this technology. We already know that. This looks like Minority Report sort of recreation. I hope all of you know the movie. If not watched it, at least heard of it. So it looks a bit of that I'm foreseeing crime and preventing it now with over-expensive regulations, as it was mentioned by Thomas, quite overreaching. But Thomas, as a European citizen, I can tell you the EU is always overreaching. They love that. So except in Ireland. In Ireland, it's tax-free, so that is not overreaching, but the rest is overreaching, because that's how you generate farthest funds, and that's how you restrict the Googles and Microsofts and now earlier Facebook, now Metas of the world. So the question is not about let us copy-paste the model, but mostly, do you need it? And in the US, you have the states' independence, so each state will launch their own regulation. Then it becomes like a show. I mean, it's really worth watching. I will love to see how from the state of New York to, in your case, where you're located, there will be a huge differentiation in the regulation with the same product. It will be fascinating to watch. So there are various questions lying there, but just remember you have elections next year. And I'm not sure launching new regulations at this point in time is a smart choice, considering the state of affairs, politically speaking. So, well, maybe consider that way.
Let's hear from Justin. So should we first of all have any regulation? And if so, should we take a page out of the EU Act?
Yeah, well, as you guys were talking, I'm not sure people know, but NIST, actually the National Institute of Standards and Technology, has actually put together a couple of interesting AI frameworks. And we had actually somebody from NIST come and speak to our Applied AI group just this past summer. And, you know, I favored the approach of putting together standards and I guess in some case industry regulations, not things that you would actually go as far reaching. I'm with Raul with regards to states are going to do whatever they're going to do. I feel like if we think back to the dawn of the internet, if we kind of came at it with the standpoint of, oh, everything's going to be bad on the internet, let's shut everything down, I think it stifles innovation. So, you know, I'm of the opinion, leave it open, create standards that actually incentivize companies to do good, rather than, you know, more of the carrot versus, you know, stick model or whip model, whatever. And so incentivize companies to do the right thing. And then let's try and have a lot more transparency. You know, you talked about elections coming up, right? My biggest fear is going to be basically a lot of the deep fakes that are you know, have started and inevitably are just going to get worse and worse. So how can we start actually, you know, being able to watermark images, have companies be very open with regards to was this generated by AI or not, and have a quick way for us to be able to filter out, you know, some of these deep fakes. And the technology is there. I mean, it's able for us to do that. We just need to get everyone on board around a standard and a standard practice. So I would highly recommend people check out NIST, you know, the NIST.gov website, and encourage more companies to take a look at some of the frameworks that they're building and use that as sort of a guiding light with regards to how we're going to build this, rather than come at it through the legal system and the courts.
Yeah. Jote, feel free to disagree or agree.
Absolutely. And I tend to apply a bit of a different lens on this topic, right? Yes, Justin, I also tend to think of the space in terms of frameworks, guidelines, instead of really hardly weaponized regulations, so to speak. When we think about when GDPR came out, the General Data Protection Regulation, of course, EU kind of trail, that blazed the trail even back then. But let's think about what that did to technology-driven companies, even including technology providers. It severely impacted how they deployed and managed the technology infrastructure that manages data, because countries decided that their citizens' data is their economic asset, their jurisdictional asset. Hence, they wanted to put some regulations around that. Now, thinking about AI regulations, well, these AI-driven products are going to be created based on certain type of data they were trained in, right? And having spent about 10 years in the healthcare space, I can't help myself but think of what are the permutations of the possibilities as an outcome, right? Think of an AI product that effectively helps people identify a certain type of condition that could be deployable on their mobile devices, right? And now this AI product becomes global. What if a country that is based in Southeast Asia that is consuming this AI-driven product starts to ask, what are the data assets on which this AI tool is trained on? Is it trained on populations that are based in the US or in the EU? And how is that relevant to our population in Southeast Asia, right? I think there are multiple questions that maybe we're not even thinking about that will come up in the near future. Instead of regulation, I believe an oversight that helps balance innovation with keeping the bad actors out as well, because deepfake is real and it's here to stay. And it will be disruptive in its own ways in many industries. But I think a regulation or an oversight or a guideline that balances innovation with making sure that responsible use of AI technologies is probably the more beneficial way for industries to adapt.
Absolutely. We have a question from the audience from Z. If you can hear us, you can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Manjeet. Really, really very insightful conversation. Thank you for all the panelists here. Thank you very much. I actually have one comment and one question. And I think Jote just talked about the responsible, I think, rules and regulations around AI the same way. If you all remember when the crypto started blowing up without any checks and balances, and it was a very scary feel around to have things trading or getting the transactions done without having any insight. I'm all for open currency base, but I'm not for free for all, right? Same thing goes for AI as well. And I'm coming from a financial industry, so I think regulations are a key for financial industry to stay on the right course to go with. It may not be the fit for one, but maybe for the others. So that's actually my comment as well, that yes, I heard and I totally understand where Raul is coming from as well. Obviously, over-regulation is not good in any case and scenario, and there are a lot of examples in a lot of different areas, whether when internet came into being, how it was regulated, how things are happening, and now different countries are regulating it, even censoring it as well. So everything has to stay in a certain course. That's one. But my question to all the panelists is you are all in different fields, right? Regardless of being generative AI or we go beyond generative AI, because generative AI may not need that much of a regulation. But when it comes to data risk, we are already fighting the data risk in the cloud age. We are already fighting the data breaches. We are already fighting all of that, right? And now when we talk about AI and when we talk about the very, very deep use cases in AI, that is going to not only consume a lot of data, but it will generate a lot of new data as well, which can then be joined with different models, right? So where do you guys see the data breach risk? Because right now we have data in folds, right? But as we are going to go further down the line, I'm thinking more that interconnection of the data will become easier, because now people will get understanding and people will start looking into data models and other areas. And they say, okay, this is how this is connected, right? Right now, they may get the data, but they may not be able to establish a connection. So I see that as a major risk in that space. So what do you guys think about? And how we can do this and what more needed to go in that direction?
Thank you so much for your question, Z. Tom, would you like to start off?
Well, so two things come to mind for me with respect to data risk and AI applications. One is feedback into your models. As you're doing that, you're moving the data more. So it's a few extra touch points for the data in process where it could be open to breach. I think, generally speaking, that's reconcilable. You can deal with that. It's just an extra step to be aware of. That, of course, any extra step like that adds a little bit more risk. But again, I think you can deal with that. I think the bigger one is if there are ways to get access to training data behind models kind of from the front end. And I think I think I remember reading, I can't say whether or not this was validated, but ways to get, I think it was ChatGPT to spew out some of its training data by asking for like a word to be repeated an infinite amount of times, like small things like that, or things that basically are kind of unintended ways to get to the back end training data from the front end of the model. I know that's not typically how they're built, but that would be the primary vulnerability that I would be concerned about.
Raul, so this question about data risk breach, what's your take on that?
That depends. Are we speaking about an American, US legally oriented question, or Asia Pacific, China, Singapore, India type of question? Because the privacy is very subjective if you look at it. Especially
my
in this
question, Rahul, is more from a humanity standpoint, because whether that was the internet age, whether that was cryptocurrency, whether that is this, it's going to affect the entire world. I'm not concerned about individual government and what they are regularizing. I'm more as a professional. When I'm looking at something, I'm looking at it from adoption standpoint and how I can safeguard the people I'm serving. I don't care what government is doing. I don't care what others are doing. I'm more concerned what me and my team are doing in terms of when we put something in front of a customer or the backend users and what data we are exposing and how we are making it sure. I think that's where I go around. It really doesn't matter. And now with no boundaries, data is exposed all across, whether we agree or disagree, it is. So I'll give you an example why I'm asking the question. I come from a banking industry. We are currently working on a lot of different AI incentives as well. The major question which I have, which I'm trying to address when I want to go beyond generative AI, is PII data, because PII data is so crucial. And it's not about just that we want to secure it. We have millions of dollars of penalty on it if it gets exposed. It's misused, right? And when we are looking at it, we are actually working on a whole risk mitigation model solely for AI generative area and AI area as well to go with. So I wanted to understand, I have Jote from the United Healthcare and other people there as well. Healthcare data is equally important. So I'm trying to understand what others are doing beyond what we already do. And we know there have been breaches. Now we are talking about bringing it to the forefront, right? Sorry, go ahead, Rahul.
Rahul, go ahead.
No, I was just trying to understand, but Jote has, I think, wanted to speak on healthcare. So I'm not a healthcare expert. There's another one for that. So he can kick in if he wants to first.
Absolutely. So you're absolutely correct that the proliferation of data and data repositories across the cloud, across organizations, it's growing at a rapid pace. And what are organizations doing to put in the safeguards to make sure that sensitive data is adequately protected, especially private data? I think each institution and us professionals, we have a responsibility to ensure that proper data classification and tagging of data, including the tools that are necessary to do so, are invested in and are implemented as well. But the reason is, once data leaves the four walls of your company, your organization, right, it's out there for the world to consume. But with one knowledge, right? Data has to be self-contained, has to be self-describing, and AI tools and other solutions that are developed should be trained in such a way that sensitive data, if flagged or if classified as such, shouldn't be exposable, right? So it is what we do at the data repository, at the metadata management solutions that we implement internally, to really curate and tag data adequately so that when it's out there, at least it can be recognized. The classification of the data could be understood, and those guidelines and frameworks can be enforced with regards to what you can or cannot do with the data.
Thank you so much, Jote, and thank you so much, Z, for asking that great question as well. I'm going to turn to Ed Kim from St. Thomas. He has a question.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I guess my question is really from a layperson's perspective, right? I'm sort of new to the field and I'm definitely learning as fast as I can. And it seems like you're drinking from the fire hose all the time. But I'm wondering if there are good resources for folks who, again, want to be good actors in this space, right? Want to use AI responsibly and, produce good output that is both human-centric and all these wonderful things. Aside from me just Googling it all up, like, are there, again, communities that we can get to? Are there GitHub repositories that are connected to this conversation that have good documentation? Like anything as a resource for those of us that are, again, starting to dip a toe in the water.
Well, we have an AI ethics course, and as part of this MS in AI that we are starting. But, I'll just step out and let others speak. Justin.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ed. I guess I touched on it a little bit but if you talk about a local community here in the Twin Cities, I highly encourage you go to appliedai.mn. And so we do monthly meetups. We meet on the first Thursday of the month. We've been meeting actually since 2019. This group has been in existence. So we've got a lot of content, a lot of knowledge. We usually try and record these. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, we created a YouTube page. So based off of the Applied AI meetup, you can launch into our YouTube page. We have a Slack channel that you can join as well. And so there's ongoing conversations. Literally every day, people are asking questions, commenting in that Slack channel, and I can get that link out to people as well. And then we have a conference. We just did a big conference on November 10th, and we'll be doing another one again in the spring. So there is a thriving community here, and my whole mission of the Applied AI MN group is just to make sure people get out and understand that there are people that are here and sort of bring people together into this conversation and learn from one another. And potentially collaborate. I would love to see our entrepreneurial community grow. There's been a lot of interesting tech startups that have been working here in the cities that a lot of people don't really know about. So yeah, we meet very, very often. There's actually another event coming up this Friday on AI and product management, and we're looking at doing a number of different verticals. One around healthcare. Somebody reached out to me about finance, actually, in particular. So yeah, check out appliedai.mn. I think the other thing that I would put a little plug in for too is there is an interesting newsletter called The Neuron that is a daily newsletter, and I found it to be pretty good, and all sorts of current updated news with regards to what's going on, and some great stuff in the industry. Everyone's cranking out a lot of content, but this one, in my opinion, seems to sort of stand out. It almost feels like it was written by a human. I say that jokingly, right? Because a lot of these other newsletters are just AI generating AI stuff. It's actually really good. So I would highly recommend the Neuron.
Raul, I know there's a lot of great stuff at Voxen in terms of AI ethics, responsible AI, and in some of those initiatives, I'm also taking a part. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Well, without repeating what I mentioned earlier, considering the social conditions in the country, which is 70% of the country being rural and being basically slightly underdeveloped from the urban areas, we do use substantial applications with them. Now, this goes primarily into farming as well as optimizing their textile industry, which is the root cause.
I think we may have lost Raul for a minute. Let me move on to the next question that we have from the audience, and that's about workforce development, skill set. Do we have enough skilled people in AI to take, AI is kind of ubiquitous. We have a lot of applications around us with AI embedded in it. Do we have enough skill set, or do we need to reskill our workforce? Of course, my take on that is that is why we have this MSN AI starting, but I would love to hear from Jote.
Absolutely. I think the short of it is the need for the talent around knowledge of AI, building AI-driven products is growing, and that need has not been met for sure across multiple industries. I also think that there is a great dilemma currently along many organizations, which is, do we go out and look for people who can build AI tools, or do we really need to invest on developing leaders who can apply AI on the right business problems? And that is quite a predicament, because the AI tools proliferation will continue to grow because now we are in the age of synthetic data as well. AI tools generating data that is not an actual transactional type data, right? But there is a severe shortage of digital leaders who have the skills and knowledge in terms of how to approach use case development that are applicable for AI tools, and also being able to demonstrate the ROI. What is the return on a specific AI investment? And what does it mean to the company's objectives and mission? And how does it actually impact the company's revenue? I believe those are the spaces where the greatest needs will continue to exist. But of course, from a training standpoint, engineers knowing how to build AI-driven products, that discipline is evolving, just beginning, and the need is going to expand tremendously.
Justin, your take on the need. Do we need more AI developers?
Yes, and that's why I think colleges and universities, online organizations are trying to assemble as much information as possible so we can sort of train the next workforce, knowledge workers, I guess, right? And that's really what's sort of unique, I think, about this technology, is that it's actually it's used in so many different facets that you don't even need to be an engineer or a programmer anymore. These generative AI tools are allowing accountants to become better. They're allowing, like I was talking about, marketing and salespeople to become better, and just making them aware that there are new tools out there. I think it was one of the founders of Google said that this is as big as the invention of fire, right? And so I don't know if I think that goes to a little bit of an extreme, but it's certainly as transformative as the invention of electricity, for example. It's going to permeate everybody's job in the coming years for sure. And you're going to get left behind if you don't, jump on this. And whether you're 20 years old or you're 60 or 70 years old, I believe that you need to start to understand how this is going to impact every sort of aspect of your life. So in short, yes, we need more people trained in this. We need more people to become thought leaders in this space. And we actually need a lot more people, I feel, just to start using the tools, right? I find a lot of people that just kind of bury their head and they're like, oh, I don't need that ChatGPT thing, you know, I don't use that Alexa thing, you know, and I'm like, you know, try it, right? And I think the more people get exposed to it, the more that they can sort of be a sounding board and actually in some ways sort of drive where the technology is going to be going in the future.
And Tom, you get to have the last word. Do we need more people with AI skills?
I mean, I think across the board. I mean, will it be helpful to have more of the deep like developer talent? Absolutely. But for most companies, they're not going to spend the time building models. It's too, especially when we're talking about generative technologies, it's too expensive. And so it's all about the use cases. So I think there's maybe two key levels. One is on the technical side, kind of integrating these tools into workflows to make things efficient. And then the other piece is what's been mentioned, the user side of things. And users understanding what it is that they're getting out of tools and basically what the tools are and what the tools are not is important. Anytime that I'm at an event or I'm at a conference and I hear people say, you know, you should be using an AI tool for this, but don't use it for this. I'm like, why not? Why not try to use it for it? If you keep a human in the loop, you can always look at what the results are and see if it gains you any time or not. And the technology that we have today is not going to be the technology that we have next week. So the quality that you might get out might be better. I wouldn't shy away of using it for just about any application with a human in the loop reviewing what comes out. So, and I think that should be something that we just get used to these days.
Great. And we are out of time. Thank you all for being here and spending an hour with us. I'm sure our audience enjoyed as much as we enjoyed hosting this together. Thank you all, and stay tuned for further webinars and further events. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.